Howdy, my name is Casey Davis, and I'm the County Extension Agent over in Kent County in North Texas. So today begins our WaterWise virtual series, and we are really just going to brush the surface with a lot of topics that I could go into a lot more detail and spend a lot more time on. But really, this is just to give you an introduction and let you know what's out there for you to come to me, work with me, or other AgriLife extension professionals to best suit your needs and what kind of issues you might be having. So we're really just going to cover the basics today. We've got 4 sections: the basics, ornamental plant selection, lawn and grass selection, and rainwater harvesting. Now, ornamental plant selection and rainwater harvesting are for sure going to be covered much more in depth at the next 2 presentations. If there's interest, we might do a lawn and grass specific section to go in a lot more detail over that topic later on after this series has ended. Okay, so the basics. In your home, you want to make sure and turn off the faucet when you're washing dishes, brushing your teeth. You want to take shorter showers wherever possible. Only wash laundry when you have full loads or combine loads, whereas you might typically wash something in hot water, something in cold water. You might combine them when you can, just to overall save that water and decrease that monthly bill every month. Now, this is just something that works for me. For my pets, they are pretty spoiled and like their fresh water. So I like to use a smaller watering bowl, which means I have to fill it up a little bit more often, but that keeps me from pouring out a big old bucket or bowl and wasting water when they decide that they don't want to drink it anymore and when they want something fresh. So that's just something that works for me. Now, this is really getting into my area here. Only water your lawn before 10 a.m. in the morning or after 7 p.m. in the evening. However, watering in the morning is going to be the most healthy for your plants. When you water in the evening, sometimes that soil moisture stays a little bit too moist, and it can cause disease or root rot in some cases. So if you can water in the mornings, if you can't, at least water after that hottest part of the day. But just keep in mind, if you're seeing some issues with your plants and you're not sure where it's coming from, but you've only been watering in the evenings, you might think about switching that up a little bit. All right, section 2. So this is probably my favorite, and I might ramble a little bit, but I'll try to stay on track. So ornamental plant selection. You've got your succulents and cacti, which some of them can be native, some can be adapted. Then you've got your Texas superstar plants, which are a group of plants within the earth kind gardening management technique, and some of them can be native or adapted. So all of these 4 types kind of mix and mingle, go in together. And again, ornamental plant selection, Texas superstar plants, is going to be something we're going to go over much more in detail with at the September 17th presentation. So just an overview here. We're going to start with succulents. So what is a succulent? According to Merriam-Webster of a plant, it's having fleshy tissues that conserve water. And so that fleshy tissue allows the plants to survive harsh, arid climates with limited water. So the word succa is actually a derivative, is derived from Latin, and it means juice or sap. So that fleshy tissue there. Now, succulents are very trendy right now. You're going to see them in a lot of pop culture, in even cake design, artwork, clothing design, lots of things right now. And for good reason. They're very pretty, they're very unique, lots of different shapes, sizes, colors, and textures. So succulents are also very environmentally sustainable. They reduce water costs, they're lower maintenance typically, and they could also be considered a xerophyte type landscape plant. So succulents are also very drought tolerant, heat tolerant. They require less fertilizer, less pesticide use, but occasionally, and especially up here in this Northeast Texas area, and the further east you go in the eastern United States, humidity is going to be a factor. But again, a lot of these plants do well in containers where you can limit that water especially from rain. If they're put indoors or under somewhere that's covered, you can really limit that water, and they can do really well. Of course, they do need a lot of sunlight in most cases. So again, you've got your native succulents and your adapted succulents. So native can have a variety of meanings, but for the most part, we're going to consider them native if they're from Texas or maybe typically from the southern United States. Of course, again, that can have a variety of meanings. You have some succulents that do well in containers or do better in containers, and some that do better in the landscape. So just remember, they need arid soil. So good drainage is key for all of these plants. A good soil type is going to be typically a 3-part mixture of some potting soil, coarse sand, and possibly even some perlite or something with larger particles that help allow for more water flow through that soil for those root systems. Okay. And I just want to go over a few. These happen to all be in my collection, and I don't know the name for all of them. But you can see that one in the middle there. I call it my starfish. It's pretty cool looking. On the right there, the group of 3, those are considered a mother of many. The one on the left-hand side of that trio is called the mother of thousands plant. And you can see it grows little plantlets all along its leaves, and you can pinch off those, or a lot of times they'll even fall off and create new little plantlets in the soil. So that one's pretty cool, pretty unique. On the bottom, you might be familiar with that. It's a Christmas cactus. They typically bloom in the late fall or early winter. Again, they're real popular this time in this area. Alrighty. Moving on. So then you've got your true cacti. So a lot of these may do well in the ground as a landscape plant. Some of them in pots. The one on the far left is in a pot. The 3 on the right going diagonally down. Those are actually all from a trip I took to West Texas up in the Panhandle. And those all are pretty sharp, pretty spiny. They're not to be messed with. And actually, cactus spines are modified leaves or bud scales. And the green fleshy part of the cactus is actually the stem. So these cactus spines are modified leaves. Of course, they're for protection for the plant. It keeps away predators, animals from bothering those plants, and it helps reduce water loss. That one kind of to the right in the middle of the diagonal ones, of course, that's going to be your prickly pear cactus. That can be pretty invasive. It's not super invasive here, but there are stands of it, especially in pastures where you're gonna have livestock grazing. So just be aware of what you're planting, what kind of plants you choose to put in your landscape, and just be aware of some of the management that's going to be required to manage them, some of the aspects of that plant. Okay. All right. Continuing on talking about some landscape succulents, some other popular ones are agave, yucca, and of course, like I said, the true cactus like prickly pear. So in this picture here, again, this is from a trip I took to West Texas. On the far left, you've got a close-up of the entire yucca plant. On the far right, you've got a close-up of the seed heads after it's bloomed. And in that middle picture there, again, just a reminder, these plants can be considered invasive, could be even considered a weed in some areas. And again, especially areas where you might have livestock grazing. So if it's going to be something that you're going to plant in your landscape, just be aware, if you've also got pasture, you want to make sure not track those seeds or spread it in any way or anything like that. But they can be very pretty and very appealing in your landscape if that's something that you choose. So again, you just want to do your research. I wouldn't say these could really truly become invasive up here in Northeast Texas, but I've seen it happen. If you've got real sandy soil and the soil content is just ideal, then it can happen. So just be, like I said, just be cautious of that. All right, so in addition to yucca, we have false yucca, also known as red yucca. They look pretty similar, not quite as thick or as tight and spiky as your traditional yucca, but they look pretty similar. They do really well up here in this area. They do well in the Metroplex area, which is where this picture was taken from. You see them a lot growing along the landscape areas along highways. So they're very low maintenance. Of course, you don't have someone out there in that area managing, watering, doing all of that along those highways. So they do really well there. All right, some more landscape varieties. You've got your yucca in the middle and on the right. That yucca is agave in that middle picture and on the far right there. Agave is sometimes called a century plant. Typically, once it blooms, that is an indicator of the plant's death. It's just how the plant ages. And typically, it's not a century long. Usually takes, depending on the specific agave variety, but upwards of 10 to 20 years before it may bloom like that. Okay, and a fun fact that I just wanted to tell y'all about, a little interesting tidbit here. So tequila, it is made from the piña, or the succulent core of the blue agave plant, so that one in the middle there. And it must be harvested at a particular point in the agave's life cycle, typically around the age of 7 years. And that's due to the slow maturity of the plant. And so it has to be harvested just at that right time to get the right, formulation, amount of sugar content and things like that within that piña for it to make a good tequila. So about 15 pounds of the piña, or the core, is used to produce 1 liter of 100% agave tequila. And another fact, tequila that is not 100% pure agave is called mixto, and it may contain as much as up to 49% non-agave sugar, which could be from cane sugar, a syrup, or just any other form or additive like sugar. And interestingly enough, I found out from one of my AgriLife specialists that non-agave sugar sometimes allows for a worse hangover. So if that's a problem for you that morning after you're struggling, I would suggest enjoying a 100% pure agave tequila. So just a little interesting fact there, kind of where that nutrition and agriculture come together. All right, so before we move on to the next step, this is just another little interesting fact I took from one of our AgriLife specialists here. And it's something that my grandmother always taught me to do in my potted plants. To put that layer of gravel or something in the bottom. We always use broken terracotta pot clay pieces. But anyways, so the latest science says no, that may not be a good idea. And that's because they're seeing that the water actually lingers in that area of where the soil transitions from coarser to finer soil. So it's commonly referred to as a perched water table. And in the picture there, you can see it's allowing for more moisture at the base of that root system, which could potentially cause a root rot. It pushes that layer up closer to the root zone. So not going out and saying you need to repot all your plants and take out all your gravel or your broken clay pieces. But if you have done that and you're noticing you're having some trouble with your plants getting root rot, we might think about taking out a little bit of that and using something more like burlap or something flatter to help with that water drainage. Okay. All right, moving on a little bit, still in the ornamental plant selection section, But moving on from succulents, this is something, again, I'm going to cover in the next presentation, but just wanted to kind of introduce it to you. In addition to the succulents that may be native or adapted, there's another group of plants that are recommended or specifically chosen for various parts of Texas, and those are grouped into the Texas superstar plants. So this was developed within Texas A&M AgriLife and is a part of the Earthkind gardening umbrella. So what is Earthkind gardening? It is a set of management techniques or ideas that focuses on using environmentally friendly management practices to produce landscapes that are very beautiful, low maintenance, and sustainable. It focuses on 4 important practices, which include landscape water conservation, reduction of fertilizer and pesticide use, landscaping for energy conservation, and the reduction of landscape waste, which would essentially end up in our landfills. So with these practices, a plant selector was developed, and that's where the Texas Superstar plants were chosen. Now, this plant selector here is something I'm going to walk us through and go over during our next presentation. But again, I just wanted to introduce it. So you can search for plants a few different ways. On the right-hand side, well, first of all, the way you get to this is urbanlandscapeguide.tmu.edu. And then on that page, there will be a plant selector icon that you click on, and it will pull up the actual plant selector. So what you can do on the right-hand side here, you can search for your specific region of where you live. You can search by picture, by the county. When you click on it, you can search by your zip code or the region or even the hardiness zone, okay? So once you've chosen your area and you want to go and start choosing or searching for different plants, this screen on the left will come up. So you can go a couple different ways about it. If you know the plant and you want to know if it's something that's going to grow well in your yard, in your landscape, you can search by the common or scientific name. Now, if it's something, maybe you're not sure what it's called, maybe you've seen it somewhere else, and so you know what color flower it has and the leaf character of it, then you can search by that and come up with possibly the exact plant or the common name and go from there. Now, you can also search, and it will tell you if it's going to be recommended to grow in your hardiness zone, okay? So you can also search by the hardiness zone and just look at the plants in general that are recommended for your area. So many different ways to go about it. It's a really neat and interesting little tool to use. So highly recommend that. And again, I'll be walking us through it during that next presentation. For now, I just wanted to introduce a few of my favorite Texas superstars. These happen to be all some that are in my personal landscape on my property. So in this frame, we've got on the far left the Rose of Sharon. That's that deep pink color in the pot there. In the middle, we've got the Texas Star Hibiscus, a beautiful cold-tolerant hibiscus. On the far right, we've got fall zinnias, and on the bottom is native flowering dogwood tree. All right, here we've got a couple in my flower bed, and that is my dog there. So you can see on the far left, that tiny, tiny plant that I had just planted that day is going to be a lantana. And a few of the lantana varieties are Texas superstars. This one is actually called a Bandana Lantana, and kind of that top middle picture there is just a close-up of what it looks like. And they grow really fast. So right now, let's see, I planted this probably early to mid-May maybe, and it's probably the size of this azalea to the right of it now. So it grows pretty large, pretty fast. They have these tiny little flower clusters. They're very appealing. Very popular to butterflies and hummingbirds as well. On the far right here, you've got Belinda's Dream Rose. Growing up, I knew it as Belinda's Rose. It has a very, very pleasant, light smell. It's a scent that I absolutely love, and when I smell it, I know that's exactly what it is. Probably one of my favorite rose scents. But it's one that's pretty hardy. Growing up, I had one on the side of my parents' house that I'd swear it probably lived upwards of 20 years before we moved away. So, and I actually took a cutting or a shoot from it, and it's still going strong today. So, all right, lastly, well, not lastly, yes, lastly, sorry. We've also got our state wildflower, the Bluebonnet. And you'll notice, like the zinnias in the previous frame, some of these are more wildflower varieties rather than your landscape plants. But they all mesh well together. They all make for a beautiful landscape. So again, pictures that I took here, picture on the left is obviously not in my landscape. The one on the left is from Texas A&M University. And the one on the right I took many years ago on a trip either to or from College Station. And you can see those cows mixed in with all those bluebonnets in that pasture. Okay, moving on to section 3. Lawn and grass selection. So a grass is not just a grass. There are many factors that go into choosing the best lawn variety for your situation. So characteristics of your property, the way you plan to use your lawn, like you're going to have a lot of foot traffic. Do you have children or pets that are going to be running on it, or pets that are peeing on it, things like that. How much sunlight and the quality of sunlight that you get in your yard, and the water guidelines. Do you have a restriction for water use in your neighborhood, or what kind of grass is going to need to be a grass that has a lesser water requirement? So all these grass varieties have a variety of requirements. And then lastly, personal management preferences. So that's going to be how often you're willing to mow or fertilize or provide additional water. So all these things play an important role in what turf grass best suits your needs. All right, this is a neat little chart I took from our AgriLife website on turf grass varieties for the home lawn. And so you can see there's about 4 main turf grass types that work well in the Northeast Texas area. And that's Bermuda grass, buffalo grass, St. Augustine grass, and Zoysia grass. And of course, of those 4, they each all have many different varieties that I'm not going to go into detail on. But that far left column are all the traits, and you can see that your Bermuda and buffalo grasses are going to require the most sunlight, whereas your St. Augustine and Zoysia grass, also going down to that next trait, shade tolerance. Your St. Augustine and Zoysia grass are going to be more shade tolerant and possibly require an hour or 2 less of sunlight. In turn, though, your St. Augustine and Zoysia are going to require a moderate amount of water, whereas your Bermuda grass and buffalo grass could be that moderate to low water requirement. Wearability. So that's an important one. In your yard, are you going to have a lot of foot traffic and pets? Are we talking about a golf course where there's going to be very heavy foot traffic? So your buffalo grass and St. Augustine have a low tolerance for wearability, and your Bermuda grass and Zoysia grass are going to have a bit higher tolerance. So Zoysia grass is pretty common in golf courses, actually. Disease potential, that's going to be moderate to low for most of them. Of course, your St. Augustine, it's pretty high for disease potential, especially in the shade. Mowing frequency and mowing height. So that's going to be an important point on your management and how often are you willing to mow. You can see there your Bermuda grass grows pretty quickly. You're going to be out there for sure every week, if not every 5 to 6 days. Your buffalo grass grows a little bit slower, so you're not going to have to mow it potentially as often. So if we're looking at this chart and we're talking about, let's say for my yard, I don't have children or lots of dogs running around, so it's not going to have a lot of foot traffic. It's pretty sunny. I don't have any large shade trees, and I really don't like mowing. So buffalo grass might be the best for my situation. Whereas if we're talking about a golf course or a park, something like that. A Zoysia grass or a Bermuda grass might be more appropriate for those places. Okay, so I just wanted to go over, a picture just to kind of see the differences of these 4 grasses. Your Bermuda grass and buffalo grass are both going to have a much finer grass blade. You can see they do look pretty different on their seed heads in that picture on the top right of each type of grass. So they do look pretty different in the seed head, but they look fairly similar on a large, broad scale picture, both that they have that finer grass blade. Your St. Augustine and your Zoysia grass are going to have a wider grass blade. Your St. Augustine, you're going to notice it. It's going to stand out and it's going to be there. Your Zoysia grass, it can be pretty compact and low lying, and that's why it does well on a lot of golf courses. All right, lastly, I just think this picture is neat. It shows some of the research that is going on currently at the Dallas AgriLife Center. And it's some research that they are doing to breed different varieties of Zoysia grass and St. Augustine grass and breeding different varieties for more drought tolerance. So research is important. I think it's cool. It shows that we're breeding for traits that will allow the homeowner to potentially have less maintenance, especially the climate here, to be more in tune with our climate and be able to handle that kind of drought that we see often. All right, moving on to section 4. That is rainwater harvesting, so rainwater collection and rain gardens. And again, this is a segment that I'm going to go over much more detail in its own presentation on September 24th. So I really am just skimming the surface here. All right, so your rainwater harvesting really boils down to 3 scales, and you've got small, medium, and large scale. Your small scale is going to cost you upwards maybe $100, potentially even less. And this will allow you to catch roof runoff and utilize it for probably 1 watering of your potted plants. Your medium scale, that's going to cost anywhere from between $1,000 to $5,000. And you will collect rainwater in tanks from a purpose-installed gutter system with a pump and underground piping. And so that's going to allow you to retrieve all that runoff water from a building, let's say it's your home or your shop or garage, and put into tanks that have a pump system to pump that water back out for you to utilize. Okay, so that's about a medium scale. If you're going to move that towards a larger scale, it's going to be installing more of that type of equipment, permanent tanks, pipes, and even a necessary purification system to treat the rainwater. And this large scale is really moving you towards eliminating the need for a purchased water or wells for irrigation. So that's really a sustainability thing. And so that large scale is going to cost quite a bit more, upwards of $10,000 or more over time, of course, to get you to that sustainable level. For the most part, it's pretty reasonable and cost effective for most folks to stay somewhere in between that small to medium scale. Of course, depending on your property, your operation, your lawn, what's going to work for you, and of course, if there's any homeowners restrictions or guidelines that you have to follow too. Okay, so just a couple pictures of that small and medium scale. This is from Master Gardener in Titus County. That small scale is going to be on the left there. That probably about a 55-gallon drum. And it's going to fill up pretty quick in 1 rainstorm. Y'all know how it rains here in Texas. It comes down hard and fast and for a short period of time. And so that'll fill up. But the problem is when you use it, you can use almost all of that in 1 watering or maybe a couple waterings. And you've got to water, especially your potted plants in the summer every few days to a couple times a week. So of course it depends on what you have. This may work for you, but it may not. It may work for you just to kind of help save a little bit of water and cut down a little bit of water use from that water hose. But if you're looking towards going to a more sustainable system, then a medium to larger scale is going to be something that works for you. All right, the picture on the right is showing that pump and piping system with those larger tanks. It's going to be something that is more permanent. And again, he's collecting rainwater from that entire shop area, and then that water will be utilized and pumped out to water plants for an entire season. Okay, again, that's something we're going to cover in much more detail in a couple weeks. Moving on to rain gardens, which essentially is another form of rainwater harvesting. Let's see here. So a rain garden is an artificial depression in the landscape that collects and stores stormwater runoff until it can infiltrate the soil. So this is an additional approach to rainwater harvesting, like I said, and it helps prevent flooding and even erosion, and it turns stormwater problems into a water supply by slowing that runoff and allowing it to soak into the ground. So keep in mind that these rain gardens are not ponds. So you can see in the diagram here, you know, there's plants growing in there. They've got mulching, some river rock and gravel on the outside to help that water infiltrate. And then the mulch and the plants in there help soak up and utilize that water and keep it from running off and flooding. So they usually have some native vegetation, usually something that's pretty hardy, visually appealing, and of course they're oftentimes insect friendly for your bees and butterflies and things like that. Lastly, just another picture here of another extension agent's rain garden. And really we just want to point out that it provides irrigation and fertilizer, or that, I'm sorry, I want to point out that you do have to provide your rain garden with additional irrigation and fertilizer, just as you would any other type of garden or landscape, especially to help get it established to be beneficial as a rainwater garden. Okay. All right, let's see here. I believe that's all I have. And again, I've got lots of links and links from the Water University at Texas A&M AgriLife Dallas. They've got a Facebook page again where they've posted lots of helpful videos that go into a lot more detail than I'm going into. So again, I'm going to try to get those posted in the comment section once I get this video itself posted. And then you can join us in the next few weeks for the upcoming programs that I'm going to have right here on our Camp County page. So with that, I just want to remind you to take time and smell the roses. These are just a few pictures of my past and current animals. I think they're all almost smelling or eating the roses. But I want to thank you all for joining me. And if you have questions, you can also post those in the comments, or even a suggestion on if you'd like to hear something different from me. So thank y'all very much.